The Possession of Hannah Grace was the only movie to come out on the last week of November, so I waited till Tuesday to see it, and to be honest, a lot of wasted potential in this movie. A lot of wasted potential. The Possession of Hannah Grace is a horror movie, and it follows an ex-cop who is now getting a graveyard shift at a hospital, specifically in the morgue. It's her job to bring in the corpses when they're delivered to the hospital, delivered to the morgue, and take note of them, take pictures of the wounds, of the body, make records of them, and put them in storage. Well, on the second night of working the graveyard shift, an unusual body comes, a twisted, burnt up, very chopped up body, who's identified as Hannah Grace. It turns out Hannah Grace was possessed by a demon, and an exorcism went very, very wrong. And now the demon is still possessing the corpse of Hannah Grace, and makes a lot of crazy things happen, kills a bunch of people, and now we've got a horror movie. Look, I'm going to cut to the chase. This was a really bad movie, and most likely you expected it to be bad. But I will say that there were a few things that were good in the movie, so I do get to talk about some good things. For one, I thought the acting was fine. There was nothing great about the acting, but nothing terrible about the acting. Even though the characters are one-dimensional, there was a lot of likable characters, and I still cared for all the characters. Even the side characters in this movie that don't get a lot of screen time. Again, I cared about the characters, acting was decent. That's at least a plus side for this film. But the biggest thing that this movie had going for it was its concept. It was a very unique concept for a possession movie, and it could have been great. Let's talk about all the elements in this film that could have turned into a good film. We have our main character who's an ex-cop. Tragic event happened. That's why she's down in the dumps. That's why she's taking this graveyard shift. And she's also dealing with an addiction problem. Now putting this character in a horror movie, putting this character in a morgue, and an unusual body comes in that could be possessed. It's twisted, it's ugly, it's grotesque, and weird things start to happen. This movie easily could have gone in the psychological horror route, where it really had some mystery of whether she's seeing things because of the pills. Is it really possessed? Is there really things going on? It could have went that route, and if it went that route, I could see this actually being a good film. And with our character dealing with problems of her own and dealing with addiction, there could have been a nice character-driven story in it as well in the background of this horror movie. Again, there's a lot of elements in this movie that could have worked and could have been a great movie, but they don't do anything with those elements, and they choose to go a generic monster slasher film sort of route in this movie. And so because of that, there is absolutely no mystery, there's no psychological horror whatsoever in it. We know for a fact from the beginning of the film that the body is possessed, and so there's really no mystery, no suspense. It's just, okay, when's our character going to figure out that she's possessed? And by doing that, they took the horror out of the movie, in a way. Another thing that I did like about the film is I liked how twisted, how grotesque the body is when it comes in. It is a rated R film, and I think all its rated R content went into the corpse of Hannah Grace. Because it actually looks good, it looks creepy, it is disturbing to look at. Unfortunately, the movie takes the horror out of it by making Hannah Grace a CGI character at sometimes, a poorly bad CGI character sometimes, but when it's actually the corpse, it's creepy looking. I think that's all the good I have to say about this movie. because this movie really derails itself. One of the things that I absolutely hated about the film is how the movie starts off with the exorcism gone wrong. Now I get it. If you want it to be in chronological order, that would be the first scene to go with. Unfortunately, it takes all the mystery out of the film, all the possible suspense and the possible psychological horror you could have in the film, and so we as the audience automatically know, yep, she's possessed, there's going to be a demon, it is supernatural, there's no point in us believing that maybe our main character is seeing things. It lays everything out right in the open to the point where, again, you get used to it right away and there's no real horror to it. Imagine if we started with our main character getting a job at the morgue and then the body comes and we get a little bit of mystery wrapped around the body, because at the beginning of the film, when she gets the body, we don't know that there was an exorcism, or at least it could have played out like that. We, as the audience, know there was an exorcism because it was the first scene in the movie. But her body was just found in an alleyway, cut up and burnt up. It wasn't from the exorcism. In fact, it was 3 months after the exorcism. Even our character learns more about the corpse, and as she digs in deep, because she is a cop, an ex-cop, so she tries to unravel the mystery around this body within that same night, and she eventually comes across that it is an exorcism and all that kind of stuff. So again, imagine if we didn't see the body, or didn't see the exorcism, and we didn't see the corpse get up. Unfortunately, we do see the corpse get up and kill a person before she figures out that there's an exorcism. Actually, I think 2 people died before she realizes, no, just 1 person dies before she realizes that it was part of an exorcism. I feel bad hating on this movie because of what it isn't, but it feels like it tried to go that route, but then people are like, oh, maybe people won't like that, so let's add some more actual horror elements with it being almost to a point where it's a slasher film / creature film. And then it just feels like all the murder scenes of the corpse killing people, it felt like they were just added in afterwards because they were worried that people wouldn't find it scary, I guess, because it doesn't have people dying right away. I don't know though, it just feels like it could have been a good movie if these elements weren't added in so generically. Another thing that I didn't like about the movie is they show too many kills, basically. It turns into a slasher film towards the middle of the movie because the corpse kills a bunch of people in this film. And not only does she kill a bunch of people, she practically kills them all in the same way. An overpowered way where she lifts them up in the air, makes them form a cross as she's stretching their body, and then goes up and kills them, pretty much. After like the second, even third time she lifts up a person psychically, it got old really fast. Another thing that's really making this film extremely bad is the CGI, and I get it. It's probably a low-budget horror film, but with the added bad CGI, it's painful to watch sometimes. There's this fire from an incinerator, and when you have characters with the fire getting so close to the fire, and this fire being almost cartoony looking, it's really painful to watch. There's also a lot of times where Hannah Grace, or the corpse of Hannah Grace, is up and moving around, and there's a lot of times where it's like a CGI version of Hannah Grace, or a computer, yeah, it's a CG version of Hannah Grace as she's crawling on walls, or even just standing up in the middle of the frame. It looks CGI and looks painful to look at. I also find it a little funny that even though she's a corpse that's supposed to twist and sort of contort as she crawls along the ground, or on the wall or the ceiling, most of the times the movements that she makes isn't all that contorting. It's just like normal crawling. but they add in like the crunching and the twisting sound of bones. And so you're sort of cringing at that, but when you're looking at the screen, it's like, okay, but she's not making those crazy contorting movements. It's just, they want you to believe that because of the sound effects. Granted, it could be because it's a corpse and rigor mortis and all that kind of stuff, but I don't know, it just doesn't look good with that combination. Ultimately, this is just a really bad horror movie that had some potential that actually could, with all these elements, could be made into a good movie. In fact, there's another movie that had a lot of the similar effects, or at least, not effects, the similar elements to it, and I would say that's a better movie than The Possession of Hannah Grace, and that movie is The Abandoned. Now, this is a sort of January release sort of horror movie. I don't even know if it got any theater releases. It was in probably 3 film festivals, 2 of them in 2015, 1 in 2016. So I have it as a January 2016 movie. And that had a lot of the same elements. It was a main character who is a girl who finds a graveyard shift job. She's sort of a security guard that looks after this historical building that's all abandoned and creepy, and there's supernatural ghosts in the movie, and she's also dealing with a mental disorder, so she has to take pills and stuff, and so it's trying to trust. It actually has more psychological elements in it than Possession of Hannah Grace. Now, The Abandoned has a terrible twist ending, and that's why I'd probably give it like 2.5 stars, but I think The Abandoned is a better film than Possession of Hannah Grace. And again, that's not even that perfect of a film. Again, that's a movie that I might give 2.5 stars to, which is more than I give Hannah Grace. So ultimately, I would give The Possession of Hannah Grace 1.5 stars. It's a bad movie, it had potential, and so I think 5.5 is a decent score. I probably could go lower, and most people would have it as a lower score, but 1.5 is a score I would give a bad movie that had potential, that I could see some good in it. So, did you see The Possession of Hannah Grace? What did you think about it? Go ahead and comment below, and if you like this video and you want to see more, please subscribe and check out my movie reviews, countdowns, or anything else of last year or previous years. As always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was Just My Opinion.